Happy Monday and welcome to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I am Brittany Carper, joined today by Richard Cohen, and we are going to wrap up the WNBA season talking about the finals that the Aces claimed their third championship in 4 years with a 97-86 victory over the Phoenix Mercury this past Friday to sweep the WNBA finals. So Richard, let's talk about game 4 first, and then we'll go into some series thoughts. But once again, just a dominating performance for the Mercury, who were shorthanded, or for the Aces, who defeated the Mercury, who were shorthanded without Satu Sabali. But what were your thoughts on game 4? And then, we'll get into the series.
Yeah, it was a kind of the game you were sort of expecting after it went to 3-0 and Sabali was out, and it kind of felt like Phoenix knew they were done for before the game started, and there was a little bit of it already felt over almost from the opening tip that Vegas pulled out the early lead, and then Phoenix never really got back on level terms. I think the closest they got was 6 points sort of early in the fourth, but it never felt like a competitive game, really, apart from Phoenix got more aggressive second half in particular to try and sort of fight their way back into it. They showed, the competitive instincts to try and make it a game, try and keep the series alive, but Vegas were always in control of the game, mostly at the free throw line. This was I looked the stats up just before we started recording. This was only the second time a team won a finals game while shooting under 40% from the field. It was the second time in the last decade. The only other time was New York in Game 5 last year in the war against Minnesota when they scored 67 points in an overtime game. So, yeah, Vegas didn't shoot that well from the field, but they were always in control of the game.
Yeah, they were really aggressive. They got to the free throw line 35 times. And I know we can talk about this now, but Nate Tibbetts and clearly the whole Mercury team very frustrated with the officiating. Asia Wilson got to the line 19 times. The Mercury as a team also got there only 19 times. So you saw that kind of boil over up and down the lineup. Nate Tibbetts assessed 2 technical fouls tossed. DeWanna Bonner, Carper. So just kind of your general thoughts on the officiating of that game and the ejection of Nate Tibbetts. There was a lot of, kind of discourse afterwards about whether he deserved to be ejected from the game, especially in a winner, go home kind of game for the Mercury.
The Tibbetts ejection, I thought he probably would have got away with it with a lot of refs. A lot of refs would have given him one tech, let him mouth off after that, and considered that the one necessary punishment for what he did. But at the same time, I didn't think it was that unreasonable to give him both and throw him out for what he did. Because when they eventually found the replay from a greater distance out, you could see that Gina Cross, the ref, gave him the first tech pretty quickly because he'd been complaining for multiple possessions and he was coming onto the court, and that was the clear one. And then we got the bit that was sort of repeated over and over again, where he stood over her and sort of was kind of trying to intimidate her, it looked like. And doing that after you've already got the first tech means you're offering the ref the chance to call the second one. So I don't think you can be that upset about getting the second one when you carry on like that, having already been given the first technical. So yeah, I don't think it was that unreasonable to throw him out.
Yeah, and I think the Mercury have been very physical throughout the whole playoffs, and it felt like in this series maybe the whistle changed a little bit for them, and the frustration they felt, boiled over in Game 4 certainly. But I also think the big thing in this series was the Mercury were just never able to shoot well from the 3-point line, and that is something that, has really propelled them to the success they had in game 4, especially. They were only 5 of 18. And on the other side of that, the Aces made 12 3-pointers. And so just touch on, what the Aces you thought did well to put themselves in the position to obviously make 12 threes, and on the other side of that, how they kind of were able to take away the 3-point line from the Mercury.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers, Vegas didn't shoot exceptionally from the 3-point line over the series, but it felt like they were shooting better than the numbers showed, because they made them at crucial times. They made them in streaks that really it they they hurt the Mercury. They scored at the right time. That run that Evans had in game 1 that ultimately changed the series. Vegas managing to steal game 1 when Phoenix really should have won that game. So yeah, I did think Hammond comfortably won the coaching chess match over Tibbetts across the series. I liked the way Hammond was consistently willing to change things even when they'd won the previous game, which you don't often see coaches do in playoff series. Normally, if something worked in the last game, that's what you do in the next one, because you think, well, I'm not going to change it. We just won that game. But we saw Hammond come out with a box and 1 to start game 3, and then a triangle and 2 to start game 4. And I almost wanted it to go to game 5 to see what the hell she'd start the next one with, because what was next on the list after that? It was, yeah, I think she continually managed to surprise Phoenix. They needed to go to their basic 2-3 zone in game 1 to manage to take that game, and that worked. But after that, we barely saw the 2-3 the rest of the series because they didn't need it. The Aces had obviously an unbelievable turnaround this season, and this capped it. It was, coming back from where they were, where I think a lot of us had written them off, was an extraordinary run to close out the year.
Yeah, over their last 28 games, they were 25-3. Obviously headlined by Asia Wilson this year, who won league MVP, defensive player of the year, and finals MVP, which had only been done by one other player in basketball history, in Hakeem Olajuwon. She also won the WNBA scoring title. And so just speak a little bit to Asia's greatness, and just kind of what you saw her involvement be, not only just this season, but over the course of her WNBA career.
She's unguardable. It's, I mean, I'm sure people who are better at breaking down tape than I am could put it in more detailed terms, but she can go past anyone. She's one of the most efficient players in the league from mid-range if you just give her that shot. And she's 6'4" with long arms, so she can shoot over pretty much anyone as well. It's a joy to watch as a basketball player, that she is that efficient, that good offensively. We heard Rebecca Lobo talking about it a lot on the broadcast about how good she is defensively without hitting people, in that she uses those long levers to get a lot of blocks, but usually without making a lot of contact, which is part of making those plays. You need to avoid the fouls. And yeah, she's extraordinary. She's also still only 29. I threw that out a couple of times during the season, that she is now right around the exact same age Maya Moore was when she played her final WNBA game, almost to the day. And that shows sort of how much time she still has left to add to this legacy. I saw people sort of making the argument about whether she's now the WNBA GOAT, and I think that's still a debate if she retired tomorrow like Moore did. But if she carries on like this and adds, I mean, we could be watching her for another decade.
Yeah,
Presumably not quite at this level, but yeah, could be a long time left to go yet.
Yeah, I think that's what the scary thing is for the league, is she is only 29. I mean, she averaged 28.5 points in the finals, 11.8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks, and captured their 3rd championship in 4 years. And I think, arguably maybe Becky Hammond's best coaching job, like you said. just being able to throw so many different looks at the Mercury in this series to just keep them off guard a little bit. And I think when you start games and you're questioning on the offensive side, if you're the Mercury, what you're going to see on the defensive side, that is a big challenge to then get into the flow of what you're trying to do. And like you said, the unique thing about that is the Aces had won every game and then they're still making changes. And so I just think, again, that speaks not only to Hammond's coaching, but just the group as a whole being willing to try new things in each game, because they are a very veteran group. They have played together, for the most part, their core for several years. And so still being able, to have that ability to adapt to whatever the coach is being asked, I think, again, speaks to what they have been as a whole. Out of their three championships, kind of what do you think was the recipes of, for success of this one?
Well, this was very different because of how bad they were for the first half of the season. That they needed to find that switch, and I think, as I said earlier, I think a lot of us didn't think it was coming. I'm pretty sure I wrote them off at least once on one of these podcasts.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked me whether I thought they were like going to do anything this year, and I just said we haven't seen it because we didn't for the first half of the season. That especially defensively, they didn't have the same chemistry, the cohesion that you need to be able to be a real challenger. They were probably going to make the playoffs, but they weren't going to do anything else. And then we've seen all of the articles at this point about the texts that Wilson sent to try and gather the team together. I reposted on Blue Sky. There was a screenshot where Young and Hammond and Wilson and Gray were sort of sat on the sidelines during that Minnesota game where they got beat by 1,000 points, and having like this conversation, which was pretty animated still, but they all looked miserable. And it was like, what are you saying to each other when you're getting beat by 50 in the fourth quarter of a game against a team that you're meant to be competitive with? And this is how your season's gone. And somehow they found something to turn it around. And that's what people are going to remember about this series, because we have seen so few teams in the history of the league that have been able to do something like this. It is very hard to turn something around in the middle of the season. And there was the Nalissa Smith trade, but there wasn't like a superstar move. There wasn't like Wilson was injured the first half and got healthy, and that was what changed it. There wasn't anything like that. There wasn't a head coaching change or inflection point like that. So that's what I think we're going to remember from this season, that this Aces team came kind of from nowhere, despite having won 2 of the previous 3 championships.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think several of us did kind of leave them for dead in the middle of the season when they were 14-14. And then, the joke was obviously on all of us because they came back and just put an incredible run together. I think when you watch the Aces, not, the Nalissa Smith trade, I don't think, like you said, was a huge impact, but it did supply some much needed offensive and rebounding, and alongside Asia Wilson. And then what we have also talked about a lot was Jewel Lloyd moving to the bench and really coming into that role for them. And, when you look even just through the finals, Kirsten Bell, I'm not sure, really played over 10 minutes in many of the games. But I think just buying into those roles too, and that's what you see so often in championship teams, is you do whatever is needed of you. And Dana Evans certainly off the bench for them, Jewel Lloyd, just providing that spark. And in this series, especially, I thought outside of the game 3 from Dewana Bonner, that was the difference to me, was those kind of role players really winning those battles for the Aces to come out on top.
Yeah, Phoenix didn't really get like a Whitcomb game, or Lexi Held even got like a couple of minutes. Yeah, they didn't get that one explosive game from a bench player that was going to light it up and turn a game. So yeah, they were always reliant on Sabally before she got hurt, Alyssa Thomas and Copper. I mean, they spent a lot of game 4 basically giving Copper the ball, getting out of the way, and letting her try and do something on her own. So yeah, I think you're right that surprisingly for Vegas, who have not been the deepest team through most of their championship runs, the bench was big for them. I was impressed by, across the season, certainly the second half of it, how Jewel Lloyd bought in to the things she needed to do as much more of a complementary piece than she's been for the whole of the rest of her career. Most of these, most superstar players who go to a team or stay on the same team where their role becomes much smaller than it used to be. A lot of them don't really want to do it, and then they stop doing anything else because if they're not getting the 15 shots per game that they used to get, then they don't want to play defense. They don't want to rebound. They're gonna stand there and pout or sit on the bench and pout if the coach has got the balls to just leave them on the bench. Lloyd didn't do that. Ruko and Lobo were talking a lot about her offensive rebounding during the series, that she was playing good defense, often on key players for Phoenix. So yeah, the whole group bought in, absolutely, and that's a credit to Hammond and to the leaders on the squad as well. Wilson, Gray, people who have brought that group together, held them together, and led to this turnaround.
Yeah, I think you're right. You don't see that often from superstar players if their role does change. And so, credit to Jewel Lloyd in doing what she needed to do to help their team be successful and come out on top. The last thing I kind of wanted to touch on is just the viewership of the finals. Through 3 games, it has been the most watched finals in 25 years. I think the game 4 numbers, they're not out yet. When it was Sabally out, I don't know that they'll be as much as 1 through 3 were, but just talk about kind of where the league is at, and obviously the accessibility of being able to watch it, and how that correlates to what we're seeing in the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the same uptick that we've been talking about the last couple of years. There are more people in the stands, there are more people watching on TV, and it's not only for games where Caitlin Clark's involved, because people are showing up to watch the finals as well. The This is part of what the players are arguing about in CBA negotiations. It's that, look at these numbers, look at how many people are watching us, how many people want to buy the teams and pay to watch the games, and that's all part of the growth of the game, which is why we're here. It's part of why we want to record 5 times a week, and there are people willing to listen because the game's growing. There's increased interest, and yeah, it's good to see. It's for those of us who've been around a long time watching this league. It's really nice to see because we were here when sometimes the people in the stands could be counted with 3 digits rather than 5. It yeah. So this is all a huge positive for the league and for everyone going forward. We just now have to hope that they manage to get a CBA done, and we don't have a lockout or a strike holding everything up and losing the momentum that the league has managed to gather the last year or two.
Yeah, you kind of segued into what I was going to say is, these numbers come out at such a critical juncture of where they are at in terms of the collective bargaining agreement. That October 31st deadline is looming. It does not seem, at least from all reports, that an agreement will be reached. You know, Having followed the league for so many years, and the last one was done in 2020. How do you kind of foresee everything shaking out? It feels certainly at this point the players have really kind of put 10 toes down, as we like to say, and dug their heels in terms of what they're asking for. Do you see, obviously in negotiations there are give and takes, but as where it is now, do you see something happening in the next month or two, or do you think this is probably looking at a little bit more long term?
Well, I people have been asking me this for a while because everyone knew that this was coming up, obviously, and I always said I expected it to go to January or February rather than get done by the 31st deadline or even by the end of the year. The only extra sort of pressure they've got that they haven't had in these previous situations is that there's 2 expansion teams waiting on a roster, and waiting on sort of players they need to publicize to try and build momentum for their season. So they will want to get it done sooner, but the players have more leverage than they've ever had before because of the things we just talked about, which means they're going to hold their position more than they ever have before. There was a report in the last couple of days from Front Office Sports about the league offering sort of a super max of about 850,000 and a league minimum of 300,000, which would be an enormous jump. But from the way those numbers were reported, it sounded like the league were basically saying, we're going to leave the structure of everything pretty much the same and just put these big new numbers in to try and get you excited, which all the way along hasn't really been what the players are asking for. They want a change of system with a more realistic revenue sharing system within the structure. And until the league actually listens to that and offers something that involves that, I don't know whether we're getting anywhere, because the players look like they're willing to hold fast. And unless like there's a groundswell from sort of the rank and file players to say that's a lot of money, they're going to offer us 300 grand as the minimum, then we'd quite like to think about taking that. And I think they're strong enough to say that's still not what we want. Then this could go for quite a while. I really hope we don't get a lockout or a strike, and I hope they get it done, but I'm not expecting it to be done until it says 2026 on the calendar rather than 2025.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the momentum and the growth of the league, and I think that's what the players are looking at in terms of asking more. The rev share is they see the numbers, they see the growth, they see the valuations that have increased in franchises, and so it's hard to ignore that side of it. When yes, the salaries increase would be great, and certainly that is something they're asking for. But when you see everything else on that number side of it, without even digging into the nitty gritty of it, I think that's something they can't ignore. But I'm with you. Like, a lockout would certainly, stop the momentum and the growth of this league. But it seems like such a critical juncture of where the players are and looking into the future, because they know how hard everyone who came before them has worked for this moment, right? And so I think they understand that they are not only doing this for where they are at in the league right now, but for everyone that's coming up behind them, because the growth of the game, especially in the lower levels, is continuing. And so I think right now it's not only for this moment, but for the several years and the generations to come after them. And I think that's kind of all I have on the collective bargaining side of it. I know you're going to probably talk a little bit later this week on, kind of a full recap of the W season, but do you have just any final thoughts on the playoffs as a whole?
I mean, it's going to be remembered for the Aces because of their championship, but also because they were so close to being eliminated twice, which I think people are going to just about manage to remember as part of the journey, that they were one putback away from going out in the first round to a 7 seed, and then went to overtime in Game 5 against a 6 seed in the semis. So yeah, I think it's the Aces journey that's going to be the memory from the playoffs. Even though ultimately our first ever best of 7 series, the league probably didn't want it to be done in a sweep, and to lose 3 TV dates and have it not be all that competitive ultimately. But yeah, in the end, it's about Las Vegas.
Yeah, they were just so good in that finals. And, coming into that, the Mercury certainly had seemed to be a little bit more battle tested just in who their opponents had been. But like you said, facing 2 elimination games, the Aces come into that series and really just take care of business. I think that game 1 was really the tipping point. If that is flipped, I think we possibly see, besides the Sabali injury, a very different series if Phoenix is able to escape with that game 1 win. But the Aces finishing the season 25-3 over a 28 game span is hard to argue with, and certainly will be remembered. The final thing we wanted to talk about today is the WNBA teams were announced Friday after the podcasts were done, so we didn't get a chance to get to those. The first team, Nafisa Collier, Alicia Gray, Kelsey Mitchell, Alyssa Thomas, Asia Wilson. Second team, Aaliyah Boston, Paige Beckers, Sabrina Ionescu, Nneka Ogwumike, and Jackie Young. I don't think I missed any or put any wrong ones out there. So I know you were kind of wanting more a little bit about the voting and how it kind of went into it. So just touch on that a little bit, Richard, or if you thought anyone maybe deserved to be on one of those teams that did not make it.
Yeah, I mean, my main feeling on this is what we talk about every year, which is, and what the players and even the head coaches and owners have been complaining about, is the word transparency. That we want to know what's going on, and the league constantly doesn't tell us what's going on. What I would like is more results. I would like to know who finished just outside the All-WNBA second team and how close they were to making it. But instead, all we get is the vote totals for the top 10. There are 9 first-team votes that we don't know who they went to. They could have gone anywhere because we don't get those additional results. And I think it's kind of ridiculous. In the NBA, they literally list out who voted for each player. We would know who Lobo voted for, who Ruocco voted for, and on and on and on. And they certainly don't do that in the WNBA, and we don't even get the totals for the players who just missed out. So yeah, that frustrates me every year. I would just like the league to tell us more information than they ever do. In terms of the actual results, I don't think there's anyone egregious on there. It was slightly different. The second team was slightly different from my picks, which you can still go and read in the end of season award pick on our newsletter. But yeah, I didn't think there was anything wrong. I think the first team pretty much picked itself because there were sort of 5 players who were considered kind of in the running for MVP. So those 5 were always going to end up on the first team. And then the interesting part was who made the second.
Yeah, I think the word transparency is probably something across many issues of the league that people want to see, from voting to officiating. Just when the viewers have more information, then they're able to digest that. And like you said, even teams and owners, it would be nice to kind of see who was just outside or where the votes were all placed, and how it kind of all laid out and mapped out to get those first and second teams. So I definitely agree with that. But like you, I didn't have a huge issue with anyone. Like, the first team was what we expected after the MVPs were kind of, the race for that was all listed out. But I think we just had a really great playoffs, with the Aces taking it, the first and second team announced. But overall, just an incredibly fun WNBA season. I know you're probably well into the Euro League now, so do you have anything you want to plug for that?
No, I mean, my coverage is still on the W side at the minute. But like you said, there's another podcast later this week, and there are off-season guides for each team. That LA came out today on the newsletter, herhoopstats.com, and you can subscribe to that to get it into your email as well. And there should be more coming from that for the other teams that I still have to do.
Yeah, it will be definitely a fun off season once we get everything settled with the collective bargaining agreement with so many, obviously free agents, and you are the guru of all of that. I had already read the Sparks one before we jumped on. So definitely hop onto Her Hoop Stats and take a look at all of Richard's off season. It's a little early to be doing any rankings. I laughed when, someone put those out, and I'm like, well, we're not really sure who's going to be on what team. So that was funny. But Richard, obviously give him a follow on all the socials that he is available. Make sure you're listening, liking, subscribing the podcast. Hop on and watch on YouTube. For Richard and myself, we hope you have a great Monday and enjoy the WNBA finals. And he will be back on to kind of give a season recap later this week. Thank you.